What if the key to a higher producing dairy cow started before she was even born? Well, in this timely episode of the Up-Level Dairy Podcast, we sit down with Dr. Jimena Laporta of the University of Wisconsin-Madison at the Adisseo VIP Seminar, where she shared cutting-edge research linking heat stress during pregnancy to long-term impacts on calves, cows, and even future generations. From fetal programming to mammary development, this conversation challenges the way we think about dry cow care and early life management. That and more right here today on the Up-Level Dairy Podcast. This episode is sponsored by Up-Level Dairy Podcast founding partner Adisseo, a global leader in nutritional solutions and premier provider of rumen-protected methionine for dairy producers who want to optimize milk production, capture more value from components, and maintain the health of their high-performing herds. Feed is the greatest expense on any dairy operation, and don't you want to know how an adjustment to the ration will affect your bottom line? Adisseo empowers nutritionists to make informed ration balancing decisions with MilkPay.com. Customizable to your dairy's own data, this profitability calculator puts the power of real-time milk market information in the palm of your hand. Find out how much your latest ration change is really costing you with the free MilkPay app available on iOS and through MilkPay.com. Jimena Laporta, welcome to the Up-Level Dairy Podcast.
Thank you.
So we're here at the Adisseo VIP meeting, and you just were on stage talking about some of your research and work that you've been doing at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Go Badgers, my alma mater. So excited to get more into this today. But before we get into some of the key topics from your presentation, just take a moment and tell me a little bit about your role at UW, what you're working on, and what you spend your time doing there.
Yes, so I'm an associate professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Department of Animal and Dairy Science. Now we merged with the animal sciences. And my role there, I'm a lactation physiologist, so I spend my time looking at how the mammary gland works. And my research is focusing mostly on the perinatal program in dairy calves. My background is a little bit not in dairy cows. So
really?
Yes. I'm originally from Ottawa in South America. So I started doing my research as an undergrad with sheep, actually, yes. And my master's was in beef cows, actually. So I come from the other side, the dark side.
The dark side, all kinds of ruminations. Yes, all kinds of ruminations.
Yes. So I did my PhD in Wisconsin. I came to the US in 2011. So I started doing my PhD looking at the calcium metabolism in the transition period of cows, looking at mammary gland physiology and how the mammary gland pull calcium from the bone, working with Laura Hernandez there. And after I finished, I went to Florida for 4 years, started my academic career there. And of course, Florida is very hot, right? So that's where I found my passion in heat stress and mammary physiology. So combining the best of both worlds, started working a lot with Jeff Dahl there and got an interest in the calf side of things. So early life mammary growth and how that perinatal programming, fetal programming, the last weeks before they calve in, late gestation, and then in the last few years, kind of moving a little bit into the pre-weaning stage. So how heat stress during these, what we call windows of susceptibility of calves can impact their lifetime performance. So that's kind of where my research area kind of goes.
Yeah, so it's been for at least the most recent years here, all about calves and heat stress from the inside to when they're on the outside.
Yeah.
And so let's get into your wheelhouse of what you spend your time doing and researching. And let's start with that fetal programming side.
Yeah.
What are some of the key points that you shared today that you really believe are the things dairy producers and nutritionists need to know about what's happening inside that calf before it's even fully developed, before it has 4 feet on the ground?
Yes. So I focus mostly on late gestation, kind of like the overlap with the dry period, because that's a time where we kind of change our management of our cows, and that's a time where the fetus is growing exponentially. And so, of course, all the organs and tissues, they are fully formed, but they are growing exponentially. A lot of organs are maturing, immune development, metabolic programming. So they are sensing their maternal environment. So they are very sensitive to temperature because they are not able to regulate their temperature very well. So they depend on maternal temperature regulation through the placenta. And so if mom gets heat stress, gets hyperthermic, their fetus will get heat stress, will start accumulating heat because they lose that gradient that the fetus can release the temperature. And so that heat accumulation during that very important growth phase of the fetus has detrimental effects that some of them are evident very early on, like they're born smaller, they grow slower, but some of them are also evident long term, their survival rate, their milk production in multiple lactations, it's not transient. So a lot of the research that we do is kind of trying to explain why that happens. And we look at the molecular mechanisms and trying how we can fix this problem, right? So could be done through mechanical cooling, fans and soakers, keeping that pregnant cow thermoneutral as much as possible. And today I talk about that, right? So what we can do during that last trimester of gestation, so we can not only improve the cow's next lactation, but also benefit the calf that is coming. And especially now, with our inventory getting shrinked, it's very important to start even before they are born. So this is kind of one of the boots on the ground that we want to emphasize to producers. Sometimes, their lactation even starts before they are born. So we have to start looking at that early life programming. And heat stress is a big stressor, not only for the cow, but also for the calf. And kind of the second part of my talk hit into the more of the nutritional component of these, how we can potentially manipulate nutrition from the maternal side to improve calf performance and cow performance as well. But in this case, looking at methionine supplementation, it's a methyl donor. So we know methylation is one of the molecular explanations on why these very short periods of stressful periods on the calf side can affect long term. So kind of trying to see if this is beneficial for them long term.
Well, this is a fantastic topic for us to talk about during this time in the dairy industry when the value of that calf, and it doesn't matter if it's a bull calf or a heifer calf, the value of that calf is so high to our dairy producers' bottom line. And there's that value for if they're being sold as, say, a day-old, beef on dairy calf. But then there's that extended value of when the ones that, we really want to nurture. So then when they enter the herd, they can hit the ground running and be at their best. And what you've been sharing today is that some of your work has dialed in on where some of those missed opportunities are from the latest stages of that last trimester and then on forward. And so have you been able to pinpoint some of those losses in what they look like, financially or other metrics of health? And let's start with that young calf.
Yes, so the calf is born smaller, especially we have worked with heifers. They are born smaller, weaker. Their immune system is really not kicking in because they are less able to absorb immunoglobulins from the get-go. So they get sick more often and they are going to leave the herd sooner. So I typically show one of our studies that we compile data from 8 years that we did experiments in Florida. And what happens is that you start to see how they start to leave the herd sooner, especially the first year before they even calve in. So these early life losses, you can imagine how detrimental they are.
So is that loss in the form of respiratory or these voluntary calls?
It's a little bit of everything.
Okay.
When you put farm records together, you have different flavors of, different things, but mostly is, small for their age, some repro and culling for many other reasons. But mostly living the first year of life. And then when they enter the lactating string, the first lactation, second lactation, and the third lactation, they like 12 to 18% more if they were in utero heat stress or leaving the herd compared to heifers that were also in summer, but we provided cooling to their mothers. So they were in the same environment, hot and humid, but you provide cooling systems with water and fans. So you allow that gestation to undergo under thermoneutral conditions in a way. The heifers that actually make it to lactation, they produce this milk, and not only in their first lactation, but their second and their third. So the consequences are really long term. They are, I like to say, for a lifetime, because if they don't leave the herd, they're going to stay, but they're going to be less productive. So when we quantify that, it's about $800 million across the U.S. You know, when you actually take into account the number of heat stress days across each state, and when you put it all together, it's really comparable when you sum up that amount with the amount that the cows will lose in their next lactation. It's really comparable to the numbers that we have for lactating cows.
But I think that, one of the drive home points here is just how valuable that heifer is and the value of maximizing her performance. So this is, from what I'm hearing from you, Jimena, this is something that just leads to those poor performers. Yeah. And whether that poor performance is noticed and causes an action or reaction at a younger age where they're leaving the herd, or they're going to be consistently lagging, it's no different than we look at respiratory disease and the impacts long-term there. So would you almost, from your perspective, say that, okay, if we're going to be looking at respiratory and maybe making some decisions based on animals' respiratory at a young age and their missed potential, would you almost look at heat stress and say, wow, that could have a similar detrimental effect long-term?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one part that we are kind of, missing a little bit is that the second generation can also be impacted. And the tricky part is that second generation, so the granddaughters of those dry cows, are also producing less milk when they get to the first lactation. But phenotypically, you don't see the differences. So they kind of go under the radar. But when they get to the lactating string, they're going to be less productive. And so that's kind of the scary part, because actually, if you look back in that dry cow, the fetal ovary of the daughter has the oocyte that will give rise to the granddaughter.
So just to reiterate what you're saying then is the impact of heat stress on that developing female calf in utero is impacting the developments of her own oocytes. Yes. And that thus is why you say there's essentially a 3-generation impact from that dry cow that didn't have proper cooling.
Heat stress or during the dry period, which is typically 6 to 8 weeks, right? Relatively short compared to, a lactation, right? What that can do is not only the cow, so the first generation, will produce less milk in the next lactation, but also her daughter and her granddaughter. We're also looking at F3 now, which is a unique data set that we have. When I moved from Florida to Wisconsin, I was able to bring some heifers with me, so I was able to continue to follow them. So now we have some F3, so the 4th generation. So we're looking at some molecular effects, because at this point our numbers are shrinking, right? We're losing a lot of heifers along the way, but it's very interesting to see that at the mammary gland level we'll still see some differences, methylation and things like that. So the effect it's really detrimental for multiple generations.
So let's talk about mitigation then. What really needs to happen to be able to manage these impacts? I mean, we can talk about cooling and different methods of just using mechanics and, cooling, sprinklers, fans. And there may be dairy managers and owners out there that are saying, well, I do something for my dry cows. How do you know if it's enough?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have to monitor, right? The tricky part with dry cows is, like, unlike lactating cows that you see that drop in intake, drop in milk, you can see when they are heat stress. With dry cows, it's less obvious because we don't have that production impact. And so we typically try to monitor respiration rates, if you can, rectal temperatures, although that's more invasive. And if you have thousands of cows, you won't do that. But I think looking at respiration rates and trying to stay, within the safe limits, 60 or less, it's what we try to do. That's one of the things that we advise. It's fairly straightforward to do. There's a lot of, today in this meeting, we were talking about AI and, technology. There's a lot of things we can do with that as well, in terms of activity, behaviors, and things like that to detect when cows are under heat stress. But I think protecting that dry cow, its impacts can go a long ways, not only for her, but also for her calf. Nutritionally, you can also help her overcome, try to change the feeding schedule, feed fat. There's a lot of different things. There's vitamins, minerals. Today we were talking about amino acid supplementation and how that can help with the deficiencies that come with heat stress. And so there's a lot of things we can do. It's not one size fit all. And it will depend on the farmer and the facilities that they have and what they can do. But I think recognizing that dry cows are also impacted, although we might not see it right in the bulk tank, it's one of the first thing. And then that calf, I like to think about the calf as transitioning from in utero to life outside the womb, right? Unprotected. And so they are still developing, and that period is still very plastic. So some of our research is targeting that pre-weaning phase as well. And we're looking at long-term effects. What we do during this time can really have long-term effects, positive effects in those heifers. So that's something that I think it's important for producers to see, right? Because sometimes you tell them you need to do this now, but then if they don't see the connection with improved production or some benefit that will improve their income, it's hard to convey the message. But perinatal programming has that power. We can positively influence the developmental trajectory. Of course, I look at the mammary gland because that's what I do best, but there's all sorts of things that can be impacted during that time that can set them off to a good start.
And you're also looking at the benefits or opportunities to provide some additional cooling there?
Yes. Our current USDA grant is looking at that nutrition management and cooling management for pre-weaned calves. So looking at the interactions, because sometimes, you have to look at both together, right? So we feed different planes of nutrition during summer, trying to increase that nutrient intake, but also we want to see, okay, it's hot, and we want to give you all this feed, right? That sometimes they don't get all of that. So what we're trying to do is, okay, can we cool them so they can get all these feed? And then what we're looking at is mammary growth, liver metabolism, and how they perform as cows. So right now, these cows, we did a big project in Georgia, actually, in collaboration with Fetal from University of Georgia, and we're following hundreds of heifers now. So very excited about this and how this early life management, nutrition, and cooling is going to hopefully give some better cows when they get into lactation 2 years after. And so looking at this interaction is very, very interesting as well.
So what stands out to you so far?
I'm very fascinated, and we just published a Journal of Dairy Science Communication review on early life mammary growth and how, phenotypically from the outside, there's not much going on. We never look at a heifer and it's like, oh, look at her mammary gland, right? We start thinking about the mammary gland when they are lactating and trying to, what can we do so she can produce more components, like Dr. Van Amberg this morning, right? But early life mammary growth, we can manipulate it, we can improve it. And that's the area that we're working on through nutrition, through cooling. But although there's not a lot going on phenotypically, when you start dissecting those tissues that are inside, there's exponential growth that's happening in there. So, and we've shown that. So that's really exciting.
So that's really the area that you've dialed in on when you look at these calves is is that mammary gland, that developing mammary gland, and what's going on in those cells at a cellular level.
Yes.
And I think that's an interesting paradigm shift for the way we look at raising calves.
It kind of is, because we typically say, okay, so from birth to weaning, we want to double body weight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And look, so far we achieved that. Typically, when you think about mammary gland, we talk about isometric and allometric growth. Is it growing at the same rate or a faster rate than the body? But we look at it as a whole, right? As the whole gland. But when you look at the parenchyma, which is a specific tissue that will become the secretory, which in a young calf, it's 10% of the gland. Most of it is fat, right? And when the calf is born, 90% of the gland is fat. It's called a fat pad. So it's a cushion where the parenchyma will start growing as she develops, right? These parenchyma from birth to weaning increase 25-fold in size. So what I'm proposing is that we can manipulate this through nutrition, through providing a better environment, because heat stress can really slow the growth of that. And so something that surprised me a little bit too is the importance of the fat pad. We kind of like neglect that, it's just fat tissue, but it's doing a lot more than that. And so we actually just submitted a proposal to look more into that. And we can manipulate that. I'm excited to keep digging.
Yeah. So how do you measure mammary growth in a calf? Like, again, looking at, okay, what are all the things that we've talked about with calves I guess I look in my own career. Okay, we're looking at rumen development because we can measure that at some, in some ways. We're looking at weight and height because we can measure it.
Yes. In the early days, they were doing palpations to actually get a feel of this parenchyma tissue that I was mentioning. You can feel it. It's like a little marble looking tissue that to the touch. It's above the teats, but it's hard to find it, and it's very subjective, right? So there are other ways. One thing that we need to think about is, one thing is what we do for research. Sometimes we euthanize animals, we dissect tissues, we measure genes, proteins, DNA. Of course, at a practical level, that's not possible, right? And so there are ways you can do through ultrasounds. We do that all the time, and you can use whatever ultrasound you have, and you can kind of quantify that parenchyma tissue. From birth to weaning, it's still a time where you can capture the whole tissue and kind of look at its trajectory. For research, we look at, okay, if we feed these diets or if we cool these calves, what's the growth trajectory of that parenchyma? But we also go one step further and take a biopsy, a little biopsy. We sedate the animals to actually look into those cells, because those cells are proliferating at a very high rate. Typically, a lactating cow, I want to say like 1% proliferation would be a normal rate. This parenchyma is proliferating 20%. So it's the very fast-growing tissue at that time. So it's very sensitive to nutrition, the environment, and whatever we provide to that heifer. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in that very short period of time, 2 months and the 2 months prior to mold these heifers so that they can be better cows in the future.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what this whole conversation is really targeted around today, is building those better cows for the future, but backtracking it to the fetal programming stage and all the way through to what has brought us to this part of our conversation now is looking at the possibilities of understanding how that mammary tissue really develops and how important that development is at a young age, and also the impacts of heat stress around that.
We are all well aware of the impact that heat stress has on lactating cows. I mean, we see it in our bulk tank and, our milk check. I think for dry cows, we're starting to get more of a feel that it impacts their future lactation. A lot of the research that I do looks into the mammary gland redevelopment during the dry period as well, and how heat stress also gets in the way of that, so that they don't have newer cells to produce in the next lactation. So kind of like getting a sense of dry period heat stress. It's also important, but not only for the cow, but also for the next generation. And so heat stress impacts more than just lactating cows, and the effects that you see are beyond summertime. The number of times that I've heard, oh, in Wisconsin, we don't have heat stress. What are you talking about? That's not true. We do. And so, 2 months of heat stress, 50 days, 60 days, whatever that is, we have a lot of cows, right? Those cows are pregnant during the dry period. So those can be impacted for the next lactation, but also you can have impacts on that calf for multiple lactations. So I think the highlights are cool your lactating cows, but also look at your dry cows. Because they are not only going to be producing in the next lactation, but also they're going to give your replacement heifers. And by providing them with the best environment, they're going to perform better. So I think it's looking at heat stress as a multi-generational approach. I think that's kind of where I want producers to kind of get from this.
Wow. Well, you have laid out this paradigm shift and this mind stretch of what heat stress is, what it does, and the impacts on the calf that, as we've been talking about, are generational.
Yeah.
And so more to be discovered in your lab at UW-Madison.
Thanks to a very active undergrad, I have an Instagram. And we have the Laporta Lab Instagram page. And also we have a lab website too.
Very good. Well, we can throw that in the show notes so that those that are interested can follow along on your research journey and see what more you uncover as you dig into all of these aspects of heat stress, its impacts, and ways to mitigate that.
Yeah, I'm excited. And thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You just heard from Dr. Jimena Laporta from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her work is a reminder that the future of your herd starts well before birth, and every management choice can shape performance for generations to come. Thanks for listening to the Up-Level Dairy Podcast. I'm your host, Peggy Coffeen. Please take a moment to follow, rate, and share this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. As always, keep on growing, keep on learning, and up-leveling your dairy. This episode is sponsored by Up-Level Dairy Podcast founding partner Adisseo, a global leader in nutritional solutions and premier provider of rumen-protected methionine for dairy producers who want to optimize milk production, capture more value from components, and maintain the health of their high-performing herds. Feed is the greatest expense on any dairy operation, and don't you want to know how an adjustment to the ration will affect your bottom line? Adisseo empowers nutritionists to make informed ration balancing decisions with MilkPay.com. Customizable to your dairy's own data, this profitability calculator puts the power of real-time milk market information in the palm of your hand. Find out how much your latest ration change is really costing you with the free MilkPay app available on iOS and through MilkPay.com.